Good evening, everybody, and welcome to a special edition of Real Talks. Um, how is everybody? I hope everybody had a great day. And this is our spoiler cast for Creed 3. So let's welcome Kyle back in the fold.
Hey,
Hey, Kyle,
everybody.
what's going on? How was your day? How was your weekend?
Oh, wow. Actually, it was a pretty good day. I went to a number of thrift stores and found a lot of stuff. One of them being a little baby Yoda, baby Grogu.
Nice,
I posted on my Twitter today. It was a lot of fun. It was one of those days where you just keep on finding things.
nice. Okay, so everybody knows that there was a huge movie to come out this weekend. Um, Anticipated because of a number of reasons. For lack of a star, for depending on how things were going, and it actually overperformed.
You're
And
talking
so,
about the film Operation Fortune, starring
yes.
Jason Statham and
Oh yeah,
Aubrey
that one.
Plaza.
And that is Creed 3. So I you went. So let's before we dive into it, tell us about your experience of when you saw it, who you saw it with, and how packed was your theater?
My theater was r- really packed because I noticed a lot of older folks at my screening than usual for a 7 p.m. screening. In fact, there were a couple handicapped folks that were in the front of the theater that I mean, I think we've been seeing a lot of tweets going around and news stories that the movies are back, and I think we're seeing that because we had Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania open up with over $100 million the other weekend, and Cocaine Bear did really well, and we have this that's looking and it's projected to make about 50 million opening weekend, which would be the highest opening weekend for the franchise. And I think that it's only going to get bigger when we get to Scream 6 next week and we get to the number of other films coming out for the next couple of months. But with Creed, I did get to see, I saw it by myself, and I remember going, my theater, the the seat I was sitting in, the recliner was broken, and the next seat was also a broken recliner. So this whole time that I'm watching the movie, I am literally sitting on the edge of my seat because I couldn't use the recliner. But I mean it did work for like the fights and all that. But I think what was exciting about seeing it at 7 was I actually got to see the first showing, which I haven't done that in a while because a lot of the showings that they've had around 3 p.m. are really early, and I tend to go a bit later around the 7 o'clock. So I guess they realize, oh, kids aren't going to go to the three. Kids aren't. I mean, people aren't really going to go there. So they had a lot more showings later in the day, later in the night, in fact. But yeah, it was pretty packed, and I my theater wasn't what you would say really responsive. Like I heard a couple of chuckles. The girl next to me, um, she was every time Michael B. Jordan came on screen, she was like, "Take it off, take it off."
And there's a funny scene in the studio, but yeah. So,
Yeah,
yeah. So
that was it.
I
Yeah, that was
yeah.
it.
So we'll get to that in a couple of minutes. But yeah, so it was my theater was, I mean, so I went to see it in IMAX. I got out a
Ooh,
couple hours ago. There was about 15 or 20 people in there. I mean, now it's Sunday, so it's the reviews are out, the good publicity is
Saturday,
out for this
Saturday.
Saturday. I keep thinking it's Sunday, Kyle. I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyways, it's in the middle of the weekend, and nonetheless, it's one of the things where all the good reviews are out, and it actually made, believe it or not, it actually made $5.3 million on Thursday night. So that in itself was a good sign. Um, yeah. So overall, so give me before we dive in, give me your thoughts overall. Like, what was your? So you went to see it. You walked out of the theater, and what did you think?
I I liked the film. I thought there were a number of things that, as a director, as a first time director, Michael B. Jordan really shined. One of the best parts about the movie is how clear everything is. When you're watching the film, the fight scenes are very easy to understand what's going on. The characters are very well focused, both in the way that they're presented on screen and the writing. Um, and the acting is incredible. For a first time director, I think Michael B. Jordan just did an incredible job. And I think that for me, a number of the elements that really work with the movie are just the relationships. So the relationships between Damien and Adonis, relationships between Adonis and Bianca, the relationships between Adonis and Amari, which I thought was a very moving and emotional relationship by having a deaf actress play this deaf character. I mean, we rarely see that, ever. And to see, this storyline where in the first film you saw Bianca dealing with her progressive hearing loss, and now to see her daughter now struggling with an even more, permanent type of hearing struggle. I thought that was really interesting. Um, and also, I think the fights were really good. Like, I think all three Creed films have incredible fights. There isn't one where I'm like, oh, the fights are terrible. Like, all of them, they do a great job, with the focusing of the camera. Sometimes they're a oneer, sometimes they are really. What I love about Creed 2 is the way the camera moves into the fight. So, like, you see in Creed 2, Victor Drago coming and then Adonis coming, and the camera, like, moves in on them as they're fighting each other. I think that was great. And here we get a lot of anime influences. So a lot of the fights are very quick. Sometimes you get to see moves that, I mean, when going in hearing that there were anime influences, I didn't quite know what to expect. Luckily, I don't think it took me out of the film, because when I'm watching the movie, I'm like, okay, that makes sense. It doesn't look like he's, like, throwing some guy or doing that. There were a number of things I thought were really, really well done in the fighting choreography. And I I mean, since we're still going in general thoughts, so I will say I was a little bit disappointed in. I think the storyline could have been a little bit better. It could have been a little bit more um, focused on who Damien was, because I don't think we got enough of who Damien was and, like, where he came from. And also, I thought that the score. It's funny because when I first saw the film, I was a little bit. Well, I was actually really critical of the score. I thought the score just paled in comparison to the first two Creed films done by Ludwig Göransson. But here, it's done by Joseph Shirley. I've listened to it again, and I appreciate it more. I will say, though, I do miss Ludwig. Like, his score for the first two Creeds, especially the first Creed, is just unforgettable. And I think that here it kind of it was missing a little bit of him. But and the I mean um Rocky's another thing where we can get into it, but I thought that it just felt a little weird. Like, Rocky didn't need to be in this movie, but it just felt weird that he wasn't even, like, mentioned in the present tense. It something felt off there. So, what about you, David? What were your overall
Yeah.
thoughts?
So yeah, it was one of those things where I liked it. I mean, for what it was and how it was done, I liked it. I mean, I thought it was, to your point about what Damien. I the couple of notes I had were this. I enjoyed the flashback to begin, right?
Mhm.
You're not just thrust into, okay, the story, here we go for it. Um, I like the fact that they started with a flashback to really kind of, because let's face it, I mean, this is the third film, and we've never seen where Adonis has come from, and so this is one of those things where um, it's always nice to go back to talk and to dig into your main protagonists about their origin story, and that's what we're doing here with this little flashback. You don't get the whole thing, but you get enough of it to kind of understand where the roots of his boxing come from. Um, just so basic thoughts. I love the signing between Adonis and Bianca with Amara. I thought what you were
Yeah.
just touching on, amazing. I thought that it was really they really go into that, and you see you know um, how how they're raising their daughter essentially, and that's so to me there were three storylines. Okay, you had your A storyline, which was Damon and Adonis. You had your B storyline, which was um, Amara, okay, with the parents, and then your C storyline was the mother, okay, played by Felicia Rashad. And so
Mhm.
they wrapped that one up pretty well. The other thing was, so the boxing, you this is to me isn't necessarily a boxing movie. There is boxing in it. Don't get me wrong, but it was very story driven. Every single one of the characters, even Dane. I mean, not to the extent of where you know they've had two other films that dive into Bianca and Adonis. We get that. You needed just enough of Dane to know. Okay, you knew where he was for the last 18 years, right? He had this happen when he was a kid. He got locked up. He had priors. Okay, he was in jail for almost 20 years. So I get it. Um, could have been lazy, but you know, um, I just didn't think you needed a deep dive into it. But the boxing was just a plot device for me. This was all about Adonis, and it was all about Bianca, and it was all about Amara, and it was all about So it was one of those things where you didn't. The boxing was you know a vehicle for it, which was nice.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like this is it. We've seen where Adonis has come from, right? Not only where he's come from, but now he's his own gym, so he's training others, and that was good to see. As I said, you made mention of it. The box sequences were amazing. I loved it.
Mhm.
I mean, I saw it in IMAX and
Oh.
thoroughly enjoyed it. Um, it looked it looked amazing. The anime, which we were talking, the slow motion. So you know what? It kind of reminded me of the Equalizer. So the
Mhm.
Antoine
Yeah.
Fuqua Equalizer, with the simple respect of the slow motion and how they're looking into each other's eyes and everything else. Um,
What's
really good.
funny about that though is they didn't use it as much as I thought they would, because if you remember in the very beginning of the film, that's when they introduce it, when Adonis like moves to the side and then he sees in slow motion, that's how he takes the opponent down. But like I thought, I mean, he only had like two fights in the film, but I thought we were going to see more of that later in the final fight, but we don't. It's a bit different. And um I don't know. I really did like the way they did that, because it also reminded me of Sherlock Holmes. Because in the Sherlock Holmes movies with Robert Downey
Yes.
Jr., he also does a similar thing. And
Yeah.
I think what was really cool about the fights, David, was that they were unique, right? Like we weren't talking about the same fights from the Creed movies, the same fights from the Rocky movies. Because there's that one fight at the end where it be like I've never seen this before. They literally make you forget about the audience. The audience disappears, and they're fighting in a cage, in
Yeah.
a prison cage. And I like that. I thought that was really unique, and it gave, I think, Michael B. Jordan, an artistic flavor to this fight. It wasn't just your average fight from a boxing movie.
My only drawback And this is like my only, not that I love this film, but it was good enough. My only qualm, okay, is that when we end round 2 and go into round 3, that's when, and I said, oh, this is going to be great. And I was waiting for the bell. And I'm waiting for the bell to go. And I'm like, okay. And the next thing you see, so they do their thing in that cage. And the next thing you see, it's round 12.
Yeah.
I went, okay. Even if they go to round 6, I get it. Round 12, I'm like, okay. I get it, but not a fan.
I had
That's
a
the
friend of
only
mine
drawback I
I
had.
think a friend of mine also had a similar criticism where it's like you're building up this fight the whole movie, and I personally I didn't really think it was, anticlimactic or anything, but I
No.
can understand there are people that do feel like maybe they could have, added a little bit more to the fight to make it more worthy. One thing I didn't really care for in this film was that character of Chavez, the one that, you know, I almost said Kang, Damien is fighting.
Mm-hmm.
And
Felix.
Felix, that whole storyline, I thought it was just, it was just used as a way to
Well, it was
get
an out.
Damien where he,
It
wanted to
was it.
go.
Yeah, it was an out.
I wanted
Essentially.
I wish they did a little bit more with that Felix character because he just comes into this storyline and he felt like more of a plot device than an actual character. But I love the fight between him and Damien because I thought that fight that he has where you really get to see Damien there and when he's like talking back at him and he beats him up and he almost like he hospitalizes him like that was a great sequence. And it was around that point in the movie where I actually got really pumped up for the film because before that I was struggling. Like I thought the first two Creed movies had me hooked from like the opening scene in. This movie took until like the end of the second act for me to really get into it. And I think like the first and second act they work, but it's really the third act that I think really shines for me. And that's why like if I had to rank the films, it is my least favorite of the Creeds just cuz I don't know, there's something. I mean, the film has the Damien and Adonis element, but I felt like it lacked a bit of the emotion of the first two Creed films. Whether like the first Creed film, you had Adonis, fighting for that name, and then also Rocky dealing with cancer. But then in the second one, you had that whole family history that Adonis had to deal with, and this one it was Adonis and Damien. But once again, with Damien, I don't know, like something about him. Jonathan Majors played that part to a T. He was a beast, a tour de force as Damien. But I don't know, something about it didn't connect with me as much as I thought it should have.
Yeah, it's not. I get it. So they've wrapped up the whole C plot line pretty early. Not pretty early, but early. So I picked up on something. When Adonis comes home late and she's braiding her hair and she's like and they're talking and one of them says, we just want you to be safe so you don't have another stroke. And I went, okay. So that tells me A, she's had a stroke. Okay. And B, she's probably going to have another stroke. And, that being said, it was one of those things where once his world comes crashing down with Felix, okay, you know, then, the mother basically says, hey, look, here's all these letters I kept from you. By the way, here's a picture. And then, you know, and now he's at a point where, you know, he gets a phone call and be like, hey, look, your mom's had a stroke. I went, okay. I mean, not that I thought it was that big of a deal. I mean, I thought it was a pretty good. Um, I thought it was, I won't say. I thought it was pretty. That's one of my other notes. I thought that was a powerful scene between Michael B. Jordan and Felicia Rashad. Um,
At her bedside.
yes,
Yes, I
yes.
agree.
I mean, it kind of reminded me of. I mean, if you're going to go that far, like the Batman. You know, I mean, with Bruce and Alfred,
Well, if you
and
want to tie it back to Rocky, I'd say it really reminded me of, Rocky and Mickey,
yeah,
which
yeah, in
when
Rocky
Mick
3.
dies, yeah, in Rocky
Yeah, so
3,
I mean, it's
Creed
one of
3,
those.
Rocky 3, so
Yeah,
they
and
probably,
that was the other thing I noticed too. Like so in the very beginning, okay, if you notice, he gives him the ticket, the original ticket.
yes.
Okay, now that's when the rope dope came about. I don't know. So I don't know how familiar you are with sports. So there was something. I'm sure you've heard the term rope dope. So what
I don't
ended
think
up
I have.
happening is Muhammad Ali and George Foreman fought in Zaire, Africa, and it was called the Rumble in the Jungle. And
Uh-huh.
for several rounds, um, it looked like Foreman was going to win,
Oh,
and Ali was just kind of, waiting and waiting, waiting, and then he knocked him out. And so it was kind of, duping him, and that was kind of like a prelude to exactly what was going to go on. Um, but yeah, it's one of those things where, and I was watching a clip from Rocky 2 today. And so because you just watched it, you'll be familiar with this. He says in Rocky 2, Apollo says, I didn't beat him. Everybody
yeah.
thinks that, So it got me to thinking because I had just seen Creed 2 the other day and I went, oh, okay. So they took that element. So, of course, anybody who's seen Creed 2 um, knows that Drago gets DQ'd. So what ends up happening is he has to come back and he has to defeat Creed or he has to defeat Drago, which essentially was the same storyline.
Mm.
Because he says, when he's in the, in the hospital and everything else, and he's like, I didn't beat him. You know what I mean? He essentially DQ'd himself. But he didn't, I did not beat him. And it's the same premise. So I found that fascinating that there was that parallel there. Um, But yeah, getting back to the third one, it was good. It wasn't great. It was good. As I said, they wrapped up the whole, her passing away. I mean, all of that happening, and really, that was the start of the third act. So he becomes champion. He gets that shot, and I understand what you're talking about. So when they're at the party, I thought that it was going to be Adonis and Dane to get into it. I did. I
Oh,
didn't. I didn't think it was going to be Drago and Vic and Felix. So there is that in what you were talking about of how, he sits down with, Felix. He said, look, I've got an idea, blah, blah, blah.
mm-hmm.
And that's how Dame sneaks in. And it's like, okay, I get it, but it's not the best. It's not the best way to do it. And I get it, right? Because how else are you supposed to shoehorn somebody in, right? And because you can't make it a 3-hour movie and have them fight all these guys to get to this. So they
Yeah.
shoehorn them in and say, okay, I don't know. It was all right. I mean, I didn't.
To go back though to the Felicia Rashad part, because I wasn't too happy with her death in the film. I
Okay.
thought it was unnecessary. Um, After she dies, it just feels like that is just forgotten. That whole storyline. Like you talk about it being wrapped up, but what does her death exactly accomplish in the film? I'm still like trying to struggle with that today as I'm thinking about the film a couple days later because she had a role in the film. It wasn't like they just killed her off in one scene, but I don't know. Like I felt like it felt like almost like they killed her off because they wanted something really emotional in this film to happen, but it it felt kind of forced to me. It didn't feel like it needed to happen. And I remember a lot of people had their issues with Wakanda Forever for it's been a couple months. So like when they kill off Angela Bassett's Queen Ramonda, I personally didn't really have an issue with that. I thought it worked for the film, but um, a lot of people had issues with that, and I felt like this is a similar type of situation where they kill off a character, the mother, the matriarch figure, and I don't know, it was a little weird to me. Um, do you think that it was necessary? Do you think that
I
they should have killed her?
yeah, so you're assuming she's in poor health and she's recovered from a stroke
Yeah.
and she's in the danger zone of having another stroke. Um and that being said, it's one of those things where I think that honestly, I think there would have been more backlash if she had had another stroke, and then that would have been something else he would have had to have worried about. Does that make sense?
Well, do you
I
mean
don't.
if she more backlash if she survived?
Yes, yeah, I do. Look, I understand once again. It feels because
I
she's
guess
aged.
I guess
She's had
what you're getting at is one, the believability factor, but also the fact that if she is alive, what is her role in the film? Because like I
exactly.
guess when they kill her off, that's her role. That's she has an important role in the film because of her death. But I don't I don't know, like I don't know, because if she survived, then she could be in the next one. I
Yeah,
I don't. Yeah, I don't know.
it's one
I
of
thought
those.
she was great in the film. I thought Felicia Rashad, she just kills it every movie.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
but yeah, I don't know. That was a little weird for me. I didn't really. It wasn't something like I thought was awful, but I just once again like the emotional elements of the film didn't quite affect me as I was hoping they would. Even the stuff with his daughter, because they introduced this element that she's being bullied in school in
Right,
the
and
beginning of
that
the
was
film.
yeah.
And I mean, they kind of don't go back to it. They,
Well, that's what the whole boxing thing is,
uh
right?
huh,
I mean that's what the whole premise is. So when the parents when Adonis and Bianca are talking to the teacher, and they say, "Look, you know, she's a gifted student, but she fights." What Adonis and Bianca have to struggle with, and there's that scene when they're preparing dinner. Okay, is are they going to train her to fight?
mm,
Because if you remember in the second Creed movie, okay, Stallone Rocky says to Adonis, "Why are you taking the fight?
mm,
Why do you want to fight?" Okay, when he says that to him, now he gets his ass kicked in that fight because there was no real reason, and so Bianca was like, "Well, you know, it's one of those things where." She doesn't have a problem defending herself. And even Adonis says, what happens if she's in a situation where she has to be able to protect herself?
yeah,
Right? I think that that whole thing, because you remember that scene, right? When they're actually at the gym, it's the gym, I believe, the scene here.
yeah,
And she's on the tablet and she like hides the tablet.
yeah,
Okay. Because that was a problem that they didn't want to introduce. And so, that's when Adonis says to her, well, you want to learn a couple of things? It'll be our little secret. And so that's when they start hitting the bag. And so she's like, I've seen all your fights. So it's one of those things. Now, I will say one thing, though. I will say one thing. I wish that, because at the end of the film, after the fight's over, you see her, sparring, boxing, having fun in the ring. I wish during some point during the film, Bianca would have been convinced and said, "Hey, Adonis, you're right. She does need to defend herself."
Yeah.
Okay, that is my one. That is my one qualm.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, what you're doing there is you're leaving it, and you're just leaving it. You don't have to show her being trained throughout the whole movie, or even a cool shot when the montages you could have seen Adonis and Amara training. But I think that Bianca should have been, if she was so adamant that she shouldn't have been fighting, she should have been convinced. Because by the end of the film, we're seeing, everything's hunky dory.
Mhm.
So that would have been my one qualm. Um, overall, okay, overall, I would say this is a good, not great film. I mean, the one thing I kept coming back to was he's directing this too.
Yeah.
Michael B. Jordan. I mean, because look, and I always go back to this movie, not because I like the movie, but because if you're talking about directorial debuts, is A Star Is Born, right? With Bradley Cooper. Bradley Cooper, he did a remarkable job with that and everything else. But that's what I'm going back to every single time. Michael B. Jordan is in 95% of this movie. And he's not only acting in it, but he's directing it. And it's two totally different things.
Yeah.
And he has to wear two hats. Not only does he have to remember his lines, but he has to say, okay, this is where the camera needs to go, set up the shots and everything else. It was good. It wasn't great. And I'm not expecting, an Oscar-worthy performance coming out of the gate. That's anybody who has high expectation for this movie is kidding themselves. I'm not saying he's going to do a horrible job. I'm saying because this is the first time he's done it. You take a look at the first time it's hard enough to make a movie. It's damn sure hard enough to make a good movie.
So what did you think of his directing?
It was good. I mean, the shots, some of the shots were really, really, I loved, so once we come out of the flashback in the first 5 minutes, we're in present day. That shot back there was amazing of the city.
Yeah, it was.
Okay, not only are we getting how luxurious he's living, but,
I
it was
like
just a
the
phenomenal
beginning.
shot.
Speaking of shots, I like the beginning of the car ride with Damien and Adonis, and they're
Yes.
playing some type of song as they're riding the car, and I'm like, immediately I'm seeing him as a director. Because sometimes when you see directors, the weaker directors, shall we say, you can't tell their film from a pile of dirt in the ground. Like sometimes there are directors that are literally, it feels when they're making a movie just like paid higher, where they're just making the film and that's that. But here, this is a director that clearly has a voice, that he definitely feels the need to show both in his art and in his at least in his acting too, because as you said, balancing both acting and directing is a feat, and this is an incredible performance he gives in this movie. We were on a Twitter Spaces the other day discussing the film, and I mentioned how I thought what's really, I think, commendable about it isn't just how he acts in the film, but how he gets the other actors to act. Because a film like this, directing for the first time, he could, fumble the ball, really badly, and the actors don't come across as well. But in my opinion, like, Tessa Thompson is better than ever as Bianca in this movie, especially the scene where her and Adonis are fighting with each other, and you just see them going at each other, and like, these are two actors that really respect each other and they know where to push themselves. Jonathan Majors is another example. I mean, there are people that we've been in spaces with that have believed he could get a nomination for this role. I don't believe that.
No, he won't get a nomination for that.
It's way too early in the year, I think, to get a nomination. But then again, I mean, we did get Everything Everywhere All at Once in around, was that May? I think it came
Yeah,
out.
but I
Or
mean,
April. So,
I
but
think
I don't think he'll get nominated. But he's real. I mean, Jonathan Majors is
he's fantastic
terrific
in
in this
this.
movie. Yeah.
He's fantastic in this. He is not only is he jacked, okay, but he comes across as being, you know, I won't say arrogant, but yeah, I mean, he has that hubris about him, right? Like I was the best. Um, yeah,
And you
and
took
so
something from me like that. The thing
exactly,
that really grifts me is when he's like, you know, I was sitting in a cell watching you become the person that watching you live the life that I was supposed to lead, or whatever he says in
yeah,
that
on the
scene,
beach
and it's
scene.
like
I think
it
that beach
it
scene,
makes sense.
you know,
Yeah.
he says, "I'm coming for everything," and you know, it's like, "Are you threatening me?" And that's when it really starts to, I mean, as soon as he calls him Baby Creed, it's all over, you know. And he stops. He's like, "What'd you say?" And now it's a completely different ball game. Um, but getting back to what you're saying about Michael B. Jordan as a director, some of the things I noticed was like in the beginning, which by the way, I know he was. Let's talk about the first 10 minutes of the movie, where he's signing with his daughter, and he's like, "Give me 5 minutes." And the next shot, he walks in, and he's wearing dinosaur costume. I went, "That's great." They're playing D. I went, "That's great." But I mean, seriously, like that shot there of LA, the shot then of at the funeral when they sit when you see Tessa Thompson sitting down looking into the bedroom, and then you see Michael B. Jordan walk in and sit down, and
Yeah.
it's them face to face. Remarkable.
Hmm.
There are a couple of other things that, and you know what? The other thing that what really made this film good, I'm going to call it good, is that he worked with Ryan Coogler. He's worked with Ryan Coogler before. And the thing is, when you work with a guy like a Ryan Coogler, okay, and now he has a story credit on this, but when you work with a Ryan Coogler, whether it's Fruitville Station or Creed or whatever it is, he absorbs all this stuff.
Hmm.
He takes all this stuff in. He's asking questions. He's proactive. He's able to then go, okay, here's what I need to do. And I was watching some quick IMDb, bit, and he said I really started thinking about Creed 3 during the filming of Creed 2. What could be. Um, I know why they used Drago in the second one, and by the way, excuse me, having him come back, being a
They,
sparring partner, I have a problem with that.
yeah,
Um,
I like that because it showed that you know it was never really between him and Victor. It was always really between the father and his image. And to see that they're now friends, it was a little reminiscent of Rocky and Apollo, but I thought it was really, I thought it was really good. Um, the there were rumors that they might make a Dragos. I don't know if it was a
no,
series
I heard about this.
or
So I
movie.
think we actually covered this on the
Oh, we
show.
did, yeah.
Well, okay, so there was a rumor that several months ago that um, they were actually considering making a Drago, um, I think it was series. I think it was television series somewhere. And so Dolph Lundgren had been asked about it. He's like, I haven't heard anything of that. And I haven't heard, you know, and so subsequently it went by the wayside. But it was one of those things where you didn't need it. You got all what you needed to see in Creed 2,
Yeah.
meaning the father son relationship, and you know, um,
It really feels like
you
them.
didn't need that.
Yeah, it
So I
feels like
think that,
them milking the brand by
yeah,
doing that. And
exactly, yeah,
it's like, I mean, when you're looking at this movie, you don't have Ivan in there either. Like, you're just really focusing on Adonis and you're focusing on the characters that have been established in these films, in these Creed films, because we also get Conlon, who makes an appearance at the beginning of the film. I gotta say, I really appreciate how this franchise hasn't recasted any of the actors. I think the young kid that's playing Adonis as a teen, that might be a different actor than the one that played him as like a kid in the first Creed. I'm
Yeah.
not too sure though. I'd have to look at that.
That to me is now. Speaking of milking, I know it's a horrible segue, but speaking of milking a franchise, um, could they or would you want to? I think it's a better question. So we see that Amara is very um, innate, is very interested in this and everything else. Would you now, hypothetically speaking, would you want to see, let's say, a series? And it doesn't have to be Michael B. Jordan, but or a movie, probably a feature film. Would you want to see a feature film of, let's say, 10 years later, of let
Well,
Amara
do
being a
you literally
fighter?
mean 10 years from now or 10
Well,
years
at any
in the
point. I mean,
film?
whether it's 10 years in 2033 or 10 years, in the film or whatever else. Would you want to see a feature film, where Michael B. Jordan is training his daughter to be a fighter?
Yes, I think that would be interesting. Um,
Okay.
I'm not aware. Has there ever been a fighter that was deaf?
No, not that I'm aware of.
I mean,
No, not that I'm
there
aware of.
has to be like a.
I'm sure. I'm not sure.
Uh,
I'm not sure. But at
how
the
would
same
it
time,
work?
I think, and this is just me spitballing here, I think that would be a fascinating feature film that would, because Amara's shown interest. She wants to follow her dad. I think that would be fascinating to see Amara becoming a fighter and having all these intersections of her being, you know, young 20 something and strong female character. I mean, it has all the check boxes
Mm-hmm.
if you think about it. Okay. Strong female character. You're continuing the franchise. Okay. You're going to get the ASL crowd in because, so that, and you're still, it's going to be Michael B. Jordan's franchise now.
Now,
For that's just a thought.
what's interesting is you look at the Rocky franchise and they teased, especially in the fifth film, where you see Rocky's son and he learns how to fight, but he's not the fighter that Rocky trains. It's really this other guy, Tommy Gunn. And then by the time you get to Rocky 6, the son kind of isn't a fighter. He's like a accountant, and then he's like in Rocky's corner, basically, as not a coach, but as one of the people on the side. And then in Creed 1, he basically says, "Oh, my son, I tried to get him to fight, but he couldn't do it." It would be really interesting to see Creed actually have a daughter that he can train, and where that goes. The thing though is, I don't know what they would do, because some people are suggesting a time jump. So the next Creed movie, um, you know, the the actress playing Amara would probably be 18 or something on that order, and he would be training her. Now that is, I guess, a possibility. I do think that with it being Creed, it's called Creed, it would still work. I don't know where Adonis goes, because I think the only opportunity now for him is for him to train. I don't think he is going to be fighting.
Well, don't forget. Right, exactly. Exactly. So don't forget that he has his own gym. He's
Yes.
training Felix or Canelo Alvarez, actually,
Yeah.
top-notch fighter in the world. But nonetheless, like so to your point, he is training. He is the one training Amara. Now there is, it's difficult because number one, women's boxing is not popular. I mean, we all know men's boxing is just it's one of those things. It doesn't matter which division, which country, what it's huge. I mean, whether it's Golden Gloves, whatever. So that is going to be hard to sell. Number two, you have to set up a worthy opponent. Okay, um, you can't just have her, go out and win the belt, so to speak, on the first thing, or um, there, and as I said, I'm just spit, but there are so many things here swirling around. I don't know if it would work, but yeah,
But
I mean,
David, when I think of some of the most famous boxing films of all time, I think of Million Dollar Baby. And I'm not gonna say like the next screen is gonna be $1 Million Baby. Yes, it says, but like I feel like that could be an avenue they go through, especially since it is still called Creed and it's about the family. But it's funny because when I was 16, when like maybe when I was 15, honestly, even before it was released, but around the time that the first Creed was coming out, I just like my younger self was hedging all my bets and was like going all the way and saying, I want there to be 6 Creed films so that the Rocky and Creed, saga can
right.
be complete together, and you could get like a box set and it's Rocky and then Creed.
Mhm.
And we're at 3 films now, which is a thing that was something I didn't expect for them to go. Like I was afraid they might stop at 2, but we got to 3. I think they are definitely making a 4th film after
Yeah, absolutely.
these numbers.
There's no way that they're not. I mean, this is so at the start of the spoiler cast you were talking about. This was made, okay. This was made on a 22 million. Okay.
Yeah.
It was okay. So it's. I have to actually look. I want to say the box office or the budget was 22 million, but I can't imagine that's right. So, I mean, they're out to your point, they're absolutely making another one.
Oh yeah, I like.
They're absolutely making
Well,
another one.
what's the phrase that you always love to use? They have to print money for this.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
that is literally what's going to happen with the 4th film, because I
This
think
had a
that.
$75 million budget.
Oh.
Okay,
Wow.
so it's made, okay, 2/3 of its money back now. Now, um, let me quickly find out. I want to say that one, I think it made like 150, the second one, off the top of my head. Um, so the second one made $214 million worldwide,
Wow, that's pretty good.
and it was on a $50 million budget.
Wow.
So immediately you're going to be in a spot where number one, you've got 2/3 of your money back. Okay. Number two, you haven't even released this overseas yet. This could be a $200 million movie. Call it 150. As long as they're making money on this, why not?
It's gonna have the word of mouth too that will
Absolutely
help it. And honestly, I mean, I don't know about Scream though. It is.
So I think, to your point, so Scream's opening this weekend. I think that it's going to do good. It's not going to do great. I don't know what the last Scream made last year. All the reviews point that it's going to be good. I think this is probably going to make, and I'm talking about Creed 3 now, probably make between $25 to $30 million next weekend. I think Scream is going to do well. I think it's going to be about 15 to 18 million. And I'm just because people are going to come out to see it. It's another sequel. Hayden Panettiere is coming back. You're getting Courtney Cox back in it. You're getting some of the older, familiar faces. But I don't
I'm gonna
think
say
it's
it
going to
makes
be
40.
that's ambitious. So you're
I-
telling
I'm
me it's going to beat? You're telling me it's going to beat Creed then?
next weekend.
Yeah.
Definitely,
Okay.
no doubt. Now,
Okay.
David, I don't know if could you pull up what Scream 5 made?
Yeah, I'll do that right now.
What I don't know if you could find what Scream 5 made opening weekend. I remember it did
Yeah.
pretty well.
I'll find that out right now.
It did
I mean,
really well opening weekend.
yeah.
And this was still, pandemic era. Like this was when it came out like after the No Way Home buzz, so it was helped by that, but
So the 2022 Scream it was on a $24 million budget, and it made $30 million opening weekend.
Yep.
And
I
it made
think it'll make 40.
137 worldwide.
I think Scream 6 can make 40 because I think that the last Scream movie was pretty good, and I think that the word of mouth and the anticipation for the next one, because also David, never doubt horror, because when it comes to horror, like you're looking at Megan, which did really well. I mean, Cocaine Bear, you can say what you want, but like it's not technically horror, but still, like you're like
Yeah, no, I understand what you mean.
you're
It's a
connecting
dark
the
comedy,
dots,
if you will.
and I think when it comes to those types of films, they do pretty well. But getting back to Creed, I do think if they make six, like I don't know if they'll make 6 Creed movies, but if they make like the 6 Creed films, I would like to see maybe in the 5th one the daughter really become like a fighter, and maybe the 4th one would
what would the plot be hypothetically? You get $50 million from a studio. They say, hey, look, we want you to make Creed 4. What's the story?
I think that'd be tough. I feel like he would be training the daughter. Like I feel like he'd be training her.
Because you have to have a fight. That's because that's the thing about these films. They're predicated on the fights.
Absolutely.
And so that's why, it's amazing when, like I said earlier, it was amazing in IMAX, but that's what people are going to see. So you'd have to build up a character for you'd have to build a character up. And I don't know,
It's tough. It's tough because when it comes to Rocky, what the Rocky movies did so well was they would basically take place one after the other. So Rocky 1, he has a tie with Apollo. Rocky 2, Apollo wants to have a rematch. Rocky 3 is a little bit different because what they do is they're like, okay, let's introduce a new character, and then they go into introducing new ones. But we should address the whole Rocky elephant in the room, because I'm curious to hear your thoughts about this. We know there's a whole bunch of issues regarding, the rights and how like Stallone wants the rights. I was watching an interview today though, where he mentioned that he has nothing against Michael B. Jordan. He thinks that he's a great guy, and he said he would be down to make another Creed with Michael, only if the producer Ern Winkler was not involved. Do you think?
I mean, MGM is not gonna. MGM, and I think I think. Correct me if I'm wrong. I could be wrong about this. Didn't Amazon just buy MGM's library?
Yes, they did.
Okay.
Yes, they did.
So I can't see them doing that, especially if look. I think he's been attached to so many of these films now that I think he's a staple. I mean, he's a staple to these films. And
Absolutely.
I think that if push is going to come over to shove, this is why they didn't put Stallone in this movie. Because he wanted this, and they said, "No, we can make it without you. See ya." I totally get it. And so, if
Did
that's the case, the studio is not going to say, "Hey, look, hit the bricks," and give him the rights. They're just not going to.
were you fine with him not being in the
Yeah,
film? Did
I
you
I, I
have
thought this
any?
honestly. This was Michael B. Jordan's film.
Yeah,
He was in 95% of this movie. You know, that's it. I mean, this was his movie,
yeah,
and I didn't miss Rocky at all. It had all of the elements you wanted. Okay, you had the fight, you had the build up, you had you know, the emotional portion of it was the daughter and the mother.
hmm
That to your point when you said you weren't too, that was what the emotional portion was, and then from there it was, you know, so yeah, I don't know. I think you could do another one. I because look, he don't forget Creed was supposed to be retired.
yeah.
He came out of retirement. I mean, I thought I'll be honest with you, and because you've essentially ended that whole thing when he walks in the locker room, you know, the beef
Yeah.
is finally over,
Yeah.
you know, and it's one of those things where now here's a
This.
thought:
Uh huh.
what if they were to get Jonathan Majors to come back
Ah.
in a different capacity? And I hate to say this, look what the Fast and Furious movies do.
Yeah. Yeah.
They copy and paste. Their villain then joins the crew to go on the next adventure.
Yeah.
You could, hypothetically speaking, or maybe there's a struggle between Adonis and Dane. Okay, they want to be, maybe she goes through the first fight and she gets really badly hurt, and Adonis is like, "I don't want that life for you." And what ends up happening is she then turns to Dane, and the one person that Adonis is, will you
Hmm.
train me?
That is
That's not. I mean,
that's an
and then
idea. That is
Dane has to go
interesting.
into Adonis and says, "This is what she wants." Backs her up. Fine, a la Rocky 4,
Because
right?
if there's anything that this franchise, we've seen is that they do tend to bring back, especially with Conlon and Drago, they do bring back other characters, and
So
especially with how much of a presence Jonathan Majors has, I could see him coming back, and they could do it where it's like he's like the Loki to Adonis's Thor, and that is a good point, David. And I think that might be where. Do you think maybe Adonis trains Damien in the next film?
no, no, because don't forget that was the whole vehicle of this story, is that he was in jail for 18 years. He missed his window, or it was closing very fast. Even in the scene when he comes over for dinner and he's talking with him, he's like, "Let me be absolutely crystal clear. I want a title shot." And Adonis is like, "I can't have that. I can't do that overnight." You know,
Mm-hmm.
that's the whole thing. And that was, to your point, I mean, him sliding in like that and them fighting and then, him breaking his hand and everything else. That's how he gets his. I
Yeah.
get that. But, and then ask yourself this question: why? Why would Adonis? Because look, they were buddies. They came back out. Yes, there was animosity, whatever. Why would Adonis then trade Dane?
Mm.
So, because look, he's been, you got to understand something too. He's already been to the top of the mountain. Even if it was one fight, he was the heavyweight champion of the world. And by the way, that while we're on the point, I would have liked to have seen more of that, because we go from Felix getting his butt kicked to his mother saying, "Oh yeah, all this
Yeah.
stuff about the thing," to him going to the beach, and then he's got the belt, and that's when the
But
whole we don't get any of that.
wouldn't it be interesting, David? Because like, couldn't they do like a reverse Rocky 3 where it's no longer Apollo training Rocky, but now it's Adonis. So instead of it being, in the next film, Damien training Adonis, it would be Adonis training Damien so he could get higher up and he can become a champion again, because they do reconcile at the end of Creed 3. And doesn't he say, like, see you around or something on that order? So you're muted.
It was open-ended.
I'm liking.
If you need anything, and that was one of the little comebacks. They're in the restaurant. If you need anything, he's like, "I'm not looking for a handout." So that was one of the callbacks. But you got to remember too, he's already been in the top of the mountain. What I would have liked, the one thing, now that you're on the point, the one thing I would have liked to have seen, we saw throughout the whole first half an hour, 45 minutes, LA, settings, luxurious. I mean, he's really in Rolls Royce, all of these things. And yes, we do see Dame's apartment, but at the same time, we don't see him as champion.
Mm-hmm.
We don't see him as champion at all. We see one thing when they're on the beach, and that's it. But we don't see him like going out and enjoying the high life and everything else. And not to say, I mean, yeah, he goes to that party where that happens, but he's not doing any of that. And I'm not saying he has to, but that would have been interesting.
I do want to know about this entourage of his. Like, what happened to these people? Because it's like he gets these.
They were in that picture. They were
No,
in
but
that
like,
picture.
all the people that were like at the beach, they had guns and.
Oh, yeah.
Were these people just people he found out of,
Well, that was his old
prison?
running mates. Remember, that was his old running mates. Where in the very beginning of the film, where he's leaning against the SUV, and he's like, where are you going? He's like, oh, he's going to go back to the crib. And I'm going to go back to apparently that's his obviously that's his house, but and run with the same people. Those were all the people he used to run with.
I think though, David, I think the next film definitely has to have Damien in it. And I think the next film will even get more of his character. It reminds me now, you've missed, I think, you didn't see the last Fast and Furious, but they are they were kind of building upon Charlize Theron's character from the other one, and
yeah, she is. I do know she's coming back for this one.
I think that makes I like the villains that they do that with, because there's always that chance where if you see in a lot of even like Marvel comic book films, they kill the villain off pretty quick. Like they kill them off in the first film, then you don't get to build. One of the reasons why Loki is such a great villain is that we get to see him built up throughout the movies. Thanos, we see him, in 2 movies. So we get more of these villains, and that'd be great to see Damien back. Yeah, I don't know. Like I think the franchise definitely has a future ahead of it. I think that it's funny because like they make all the Creed films feel like they could be the end of the saga. Like the first film has a nice ending to it. Like I don't think that they could make another one after the first one. They could have just left it at that. Same with the second one, and the third one also has a nice fitting ending. But I think, and this sounds kind of morbid to say, but I think this series is heading towards the path where Bianca loses her entire hearing.
Oh yeah, I could very easily see that.
I could see it in
I
maybe the
could
next
very
film.
easily see that because that is even touched upon in when they're at the party,
Yeah.
right? When Dame's talking to her and essentially says, "So how does it feel having?" Because they first touch upon it outside, and so she's like, I've transitioned to be more of a producer and everything else, and then at the party, she says, he says to her, "Well, how does it feel to have somebody else sing this song?" And
Mm-hmm.
she's like, "It's really good." I have no doubt that and even she addresses it too, in the simple respect of um, when she says, Adonis makes that comment about when they're arguing about if they want to have a Mara fight, and he says something about deaf people, and she says, "Well, what do you mean?" And so I mean, not to say that's the end all be all. What I'm getting at is you're right. I that's an interesting call because the thing is, as this franchise has continued, as it's gone on, we have seen her hearing get progressively and progressively worse.
Mm-hmm.
And even she said in the film, "I'm now taking a step back so I can
Yeah.
concentrate on what I have left." Um, so there is, I would put I would put $1 down in the next film that she's completely deaf. I think you're right because
Because
I
I
think
think that
that
would be. I mean,
yeah.
it's, as I said, morbid to say, but I think that would be the
Well, that's
progression
the
of
whole
her character.
storyline, right?
It
That's
is. It
why she's
is.
as good as I won't say as good as she is, but that's why
Mm-hmm.
she's not performing anymore.
Yeah.
That's why she's exclusively a producer.
Yeah.
I think that if you have her, because you have to end the arc, right? She started in Creed, Adonis met her and she had a little bit of hearing loss, and then it was getting
Mm.
more and more and more, and then so I don't doubt that.
They
Um,
could. They could really. I
and they can
mean,
play the emotional aspect of that too.
yeah.
Tessa
It,
Thompson is a phenomenal,
she is. She
phenomenal
really
actress.
is. Oh, she's so good.
She's so
And
good. She's so
oh,
underrated too.
and I
And
think it's only, like when it comes to her, when it comes to Michael, Jonathan Majors,
mhm,
they're only going to go up from here. Like, this isn't their peak yet. I feel like they still have many, many
I
years.
can't wait to see where Majors goes. His sky is the limit.
He has that
I mean,
one
Johnson.
film.
Here's the thing: Michael B. Johnson is already a star. Throw out Fantastic Four for a minute. I mean, that was a debacle in itself. They had to make that for what it was. But you take a look at what he's done in Fruitvale Station.
Yeah.
Okay, Creed, Creed 2. This is his franchise.
Black Panther.
Black Panther, Wakanda Forever. This is his franchise. And he's only going to, he is an A-list guy
And I
right
mean,
now.
directing, David. Like, now he's established as a director. Studios, especially after this weekend, when we see the box office, studios are going to be lined up outside his door, being like, "Michael, we got to get you to make this."
Well, and that
next
brings up an
film.
interesting point. And somebody brought this up the other night. Okay. So he actually has 4 different projects upcoming.
Okay,
He has Rainbow Six,
which
okay, which is in
I'm
pre-production.
I'm looking forward to.
So anybody who doesn't know about Rainbow Six
Yeah.
is it's a Tom Clancy um, video game / novel, military guys. Um, wrong answer. Okay. The remake of the Thomas Crown Affair project,
Ooh, I forgot about that one.
and then that's in pre-production, and then Methuselah. I totally butchered that, but I mean he's got another one there.
Mhm.
So he has 4 now. This brings up an interesting question. Does Michael not take time off, but does he not act as much? I mean, obviously he's got those 4 projects, but does he not act as much?
It's
And
honestly,
just go behind the camera.
I think I think he'll be doing both because look up Bradley Cooper, right? We got Bradley Cooper direct Star is Born. He starred in a whole number of films afterwards.
But the thing is, not to cut you off, the thing
Yeah.
is, now, by the way, Cooper's got this, and it's going to be, everybody's eager to see this new film coming out from Netflix this year. It's called Maestro. Okay. Leonard Bernstein.
Yeah.
It's, anyways, the point is, though, Cooper's to the point where if you look at his career, he had 3 Oscar nominations in 4 years, 4 Oscar nominations in 5 years. Okay. He had Silver Linings Playbook, he had American Hustle, he had American Sniper, and he had A Star is Born.
Mm-hmm.
He owned the 2010s. Didn't win one time. I think now he's gotten to the point where he said, you know what? The only way I'm going to win is if I act and direct. And not only am I going to act and I'm going to direct, but I'm going to choose a biopic. And we've talked about it extensively of how many you can look back, whether it's Lincoln, whether it's Gandhi, whether it's, Gary Oldman for The Darkest Hour, whatever, Raleigh Malek for Bohemian Rhapsody. They have a hard-on for biopics. That being said, you really haven't seen Cooper, besides Licorice Pizza, you really haven't seen him in a lot. So I think he's starting to take a more behind the camera thing. I can't see that with Michael B. Jordan.
I don't see it because also, Michael B. Jordan right now, as he gets going, Michael B. Jordan is an actor first. He's an actor that's been working in this industry for so long that, he's cutting his teeth on directing with this film. I would really love to read the behind the scenes where they get into at what point, where did they try to look for other directors and other directors couldn't sign on and then Michael B. Jordan signed on, or did he from the get-go want to direct this film?
I'll be honest with you. I think it was in his contract. I think when they signed him,
really?
This is total speculation, but my guess is this, that when he signed with MGM all those years ago, it was for a 3-picture deal, and they said, okay, fine, these do well, we're going to have you direct the 3rd film. And
I don't know.
I think that because don't forget, he said this in an IMDb thing. He said, I started thinking about Creed 2 when I was filming Creed 2. So that meant that he was already starting to get all the elements together of who he wanted, story, and everything else. I think we both agree this was an okay film. You're, as you said, kind of cut your teeth on it. And but my guess is that he had enough clout to go to the MGM and be like, look, I want to direct the 3rd one. Either that or it was in his contract.
I think.
Because if he threatens to walk away, it doesn't get made.
I think.
Seriously.
Yeah. I think the thing is, though, I think with Creed 1, you had Coogler come in. And at the time, he wasn't, what we know of him today. At the time, he had only done Fruitvale Station. And this was a big project, and he convinced Stallone with his screenplay that, to make this movie. But then Coogler had to make Black Panther, so he didn't make Creed 2. And then they got Steve Caple Jr., who came in and did a fantastic job with Creed 2. And I think, unless they wanted to get Steve Caple Jr. and then he was doing Transformers, but I think Michael B. Jordan also probably saw, this is a great franchise where you're getting people, you're giving not first-time directors, but you're giving directors starting out, a chance. And I think he probably also was able to get through that. And, it's part of the Rocky tradition because Stallone directed Rocky 2, Rocky 3, Rocky 4, and Rocky 6. So it's poetic that, you have the successor to the franchise in Michael B. Jordan directing Creed 3. I think he will direct Creed 4.
I have no doubt in my mind he'll direct
I
Creed
I
4.
think that I think because I think what's gonna happen is, like you said, this is his franchise. This will also be because I think that would be because I mean they did this happen with Rocky Five. Stallone stepped down and John G. Avildsen came back in to direct it. I think it would be crazy to see Creed 4 directed by another director.
Yeah.
Because that would be real. I mean, because for all we know, David, he could, Michael B. Jordan might get a huge project that he has to direct, and he's in pre-production for that, and then stars in Creed 4. But
Yeah,
I think,
I mean,
like you, I think that it's highly likely that he's directing Creed 4, and I think they'll wait to make it until he can put it into place because this is now his franchise and he cares a lot about it. So
don't be shocked, surprised, or flabbergasted if you hear within the next, I would say, 2 to 3 months. As soon as this thing is out of theaters, do not be shocked if you hear some sort of announcement
what
about
about a
Michael B.
week?
Jordan
Oh,
directing it.
you just mean like directing. I mean, I think
Don't be
they might
shocked.
announce Creed 4 in a week, after the box office numbers.
It's a little early.
I just said I think though, because
No,
the thing is,
No, I understand what you mean.
they made this mistake with Wonder Woman. When Wonder Woman 1984 was released, and this was not really a mistake, it was them trying to ensure that everything I think was all right in in the Hollywood land, because Wonder Woman 1984 comes out on HBO Max day and date in theaters. It does not do that well in theaters. And a couple days later, they announce Patty Jenkins has been signed on to make Wonder Woman 3. And her and Gal Gadot.
Right, I remember that.
On. And it was very weird because when they announced it, Wonder Woman 1984 was not getting the best reviews. The box office, of course, it was pandemic affected, but it was like, well, that's good to know they're making another one, but what about the one they just made?
Yeah, right.
Which is,
I think it all depends, to be absolutely honest. I think it all depends on the franchise.
Yeah.
So you take
because this took a while. Like they didn't announce Creed 3, I believe, like a week after Creed 2 opened.
Right.
It took like a year or so for them to really get going.
I mean,
on pre-production.
the reason I say that is you take a look at something like The Last of Us.
Yeah.
And everybody kind of, I mean, they were dropping little breadcrumbs and hints. Hey, look, we're going to go down this road. But they had never made it official. And subsequently, it was like a month ago or 6 weeks ago. Hey, look, guys, I think it was after episode 2.
Yeah.
Hey, guys, look, we just greenlit The Last of Us season 2. Oh, shit, really? And all
same
the
thing happened with House of the Dragon.
Yeah. So as soon as they saw those ratings, they said, we need to jump on this now. So I think it all depends on, what the franchise is, who the director is, and how things go. Because I've never seen Wonder Woman 1984, but from what I understand, and everybody that has seen it, it's not the best. But the thing is, the theaters were closed. You were just talking about that. Even if this movie makes, and I'm just spent $250, $300 million, and it's a $600 million movie. I mean, listen, Warner Brothers was so confident in this movie that they paid out a $10 million bonus to both Patty Jenkins and Gal Gadot.
I wouldn't say they were so confident. What Warner Brothers was they knew if they didn't give them that money, if you remember,
all hell was going to break loose.
You remember, all hell broke loose when they announced that day and date plan, and one of the reasons why was because they only gave that money to Gal and Patty. They didn't give it to any of the other directors. Well, to be fair, too,
they didn't notify the filmmakers.
Exactly. Yes.
So
and then of course
they felt like, I mean,
they gave
I don't. I'm sure you've read the Denis Villeneuve.
Yep.
The New York Times absolutely scathing editorial from because
It's actually shocking how they're able to make a Doom Part 2 with him.
Well, I think
after.
to your
It was
point,
probably under a contract.
they knew.
Yeah.
My guess is that they knew that no matter what was going to happen, it was in his contract. Hey, listen, doesn't matter what happens, unless the world ends, we're going to give you a second part.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter if this thing bombs,
Which
because
is actually,
it's in the contract.
It's actually
And then on
crazy.
the flip side of the coin, okay, you have what happened at Disney,
Mhm.
and Kevin Feige was not once, but twice that close away from walking away and quitting.
Yeah.
So they said, hey, look, if somebody does it over here,
Yeah.
they should probably do it over
So,
there.
Going back to Creed, though.
Anyways,
what would be your final thoughts?
I liked it.
Have?
It's
You
a good directorial debut. There were problems with it. I mean, this wasn't going to be an Academy Award winning thing. The story was good. The boxing was a plot device. I thought it was story driven. Boxing sequences, as we've discussed, were great. My one qualm, like I said, is I wish, in that scene with the cage, I wish they had actually put it to, let's say, even round 4. That would have been, but that huge time jump, okay, fine. Now you're in the final round. I get it. Didn't particularly care for it, but I understand it. It was good. Moving forward, I think they have some questions, not a lot. Number 1, do they bring Jonathan Majors back? Number 2, do they go down the road of actually having Amara be a boxer? And if they do, how do they play all that in? Number 3, do they actually, which was a great pickup on you, do they actually have Bianca completely lose her hearing in the next one? And number 4, I think this is the biggest question. Do the fans really want it?
Oh,
because listen,
I think
while we're sitting here talking about this today, and it's going to make 50 to 55 million and probably 300 worldwide, there are some franchises that are just great with 3. They could completely shut the doors on this.
The better question, though, I mean, I don't know if it's even a better question. It might not be it, but because like this movie still had the Rocky effect, right? You still were. I mean, there were a number of people that didn't know Stallone wasn't gonna appear in this film. Like, I didn't know that until a couple weeks ago when people who had actually seen it said he's not in the film, and I do wonder, where does this franchise go in the next film if Rocky isn't
That's the only storyline I see. That's the only storyline I see.
What storyline?
That Amara's being trained. That's it.
There's
a time jump.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, but like, because like, people see this film. I want to see the cinema score. It's probably really high, but will there be fans of Rocky that might just be like, oh, I'm checked? Because I remember you said you checked out of the Rocky franchise. You checked out of Rocky. After Rocky 4?
Yeah, after Rocky 4, yeah.
And that still had him in it, right? Like that still had Rocky in it, and this is Creed's franchise, so of course he'll be in the next one. But it's like, I mean, there are people out there that when you see these movies that are tied to the franchise, look at Rise of Skywalker, for instance, where you had killed off Luke in the previous movie. You knew Carrie Fisher, at least to the capacity of the film, wasn't going to be in the film as much as I think people would have liked to see her in it. And at first we had no idea, but we just assumed, Han Solo's dead, so he's not going to be in it. Surprise, he was. But, it's not the same when you don't have
I'm just shocked that there were no pictures either.
Of
like
what?
In that little man cave with the pool table and it said Creed and all the belts hanging up, or there was no pictures.
There was, so that one picture, there's a picture of Creed and someone else. That wasn't Rocky?
I don't know. I didn't even see the picture.
Because I missed it, and I was like, maybe that's Rocky? Because if that, telling you, David, if that wasn't Rocky, I'm going to have to look it up. If that wasn't Rocky, that's crazy to me.
Well,
There
not
was
only
a
that,
picture of Rocky
like
Balboa.
I didn't, even in Creed, when Adonis introduces himself, and he's like, "This is from the first fight, the 10th round, isn't it?"
Yeah.
He's like, "Yeah. How did you know that?" And he's like, "What are you, a cousin?" And he's like, "No, I'm so and so." But there was not one picture, and they're walking around the room. They were at the bar. They were over the trophy case. They were at the pool. I'm like, where are the pictures? There's not one picture of
It
Rocky.
felt really like, at least watching the film, it really felt like Rocky had moved away from Creed.
Yeah.
Like Stallone had moved away from the film itself, where it almost feels like there's bad blood between Adonis and Rocky in the movie, where they don't talk to each other. Like they could have said, oh, he's now vacationing with
Yeah.
his
He's
family, but
off
they just
somewhere.
like,
Enjoying
what
the
about the
sun.
daughter? Like, did she ever get to really hang out with him? We don't know.
Yeah.
But I'll just say, for my quick final thoughts, I thought the film was pretty good. I didn't think it was great. Kind of like what you were saying. I think that there were elements of the film that could have been fleshed out a little bit more. I thought that, at least in terms of acting, though, like all the acting was great. I thought Jonathan Majors, for a villain, I thought he was pretty good. I think, once again, he could have been a little bit more developed, but I thought he was a suitable villain in this franchise, and I think that Michael B. Jordan as a director really, I think, knocked it out of the park with his directorial debut, because I mean,
I agree with all those sentiments, because the thing is, it was kind of an excuse. I mean, and I get it, but the whole 18 years being locked away thing was an excuse. And so it is what it is. Jordan did a great job. It's going to be interesting to see where they go with the daughter thing. And if he trains now and everything else, because that's the other thing too. Rocky trained, some other people. So he's starting to do that. Look, it's going to make money. Whenever the Rock Creed 4 comes out, it's going to make money. I just hope that, my hope, couple of things is, number one, Majors comes back. And number two, they have more involvement. And, so I want to see Coogler write the fourth script. That's what I want. And, co-write it with Michael B. Jordan. Because there was a different vibe to it, I think, too. When Coogler, and I'll wrap this up here in a minute, but when Coogler writes something and directs something. Just because of the how tight it is and everything else. Just saying it wasn't tight. But when you only have a story credit, that's basically saying, like, a Stan Lee created by Stan Lee. Created story by Ryan Coogler. Yeah, okay, fine. So, anyways, guys, so this was the spoiler cast for Creed 3. Really good. I liked it. I'll probably go back and see it again just because as he was making mention of it, Scream is going to be coming out. I'm not going to be covering it here because we have other things on the channel that we're going to be doing. And so that's about it. So are you going to go see Scream? I guess is the question.
Yeah, I love the franchise.
So you're right in that window too.
I'm not
they love because 96 is when I remember when the first Scream came out, and it's like ever since then. And I remember when the reboot came out, I'm like, oh my god, they're making another Scream. I'm like, and then it did well, and I'm like, oh god, they're making another. That's like they're coming out with The Exorcist later.
Did you see the first Scream? Did you see the first one?
What, back in 96?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah,
it's a great movie. Like,
it's for its time. I mean, it's one. Wes Craven is a
genius.
He is an absolute genius.
Yeah.
You think of the two franchises he's put together? Forget about the remake of it. Nightmare on Elm Street and Scream.
Yeah.
The man is an absolute genius.
And I mean, the thing is when it comes to the Scream franchise, they're in a way like Rocky. Like, they all are connected. I personally, I think that the worst Scream is Scream 4. And I think that the second worst is Scream 3. Sadly, those are the last two directed by Wes Craven. But I think both Scream 1 and Scream 2 are great. And Scream 5 was pretty good itself. So, yeah, I will be watching Scream 6. Cool. I will not be rewatching the movies, though. Because I don't feel like it.
Yeah, I don't feel like it. So tell us, since we last, have you like, so do you want to do like movie reviews, like this sort of
Oh
thing
yeah,
on
because
your
I
channel?
actually I was I was gonna do a Creed review on my YouTube channel, but then
You should have done it.
maybe I will do it again.
No, I mean,
Um,
obviously, so this has been going on for
I
90 minutes, guys, and
yeah
so that's a touch long, but nonetheless, that's because there's two people. You should
yeah.
absolutely sit down and do a Creed review, and because you have the great thoughts about it, put it in
Mhm.
like a 15, not even a 15 or 20-minute thing, but like do what Dimitri does. Put a
Yeah,
script
yeah.
together, what you liked, what you didn't like, and just have a backdrop and go for it.
My most recent one is I did a review for The Mandalorian season 3 episode 1. So if you
Cool.
guys want to check out, you guys can check out that
Cool.
review on my channel. But yeah, I'll
Cool.
be trying to do some stuff like that in the
Good.
future. So yeah.
Good stuff. All right. That's about it for us today. You know, and we, like I said, we got a ton of stuff coming up. So on that note, do the three things that everybody needs to do. Be safe, be careful, and have a great day tomorrow. I'm David, and he's Kyle, and you've been watching Real Talks. Thanks. Bye bye.
Bye everybody.